Let's revisit the story that made headlines this week, where Sia and Rachel Kolisi's divorce has shocked South Africans and also caused a social media frenzy. The Kolisis announced their decision to end their 8-year-old marriage in a joint statement on Instagram. Now, they said the decision to split was mutual and amicable. For more on divorce in South Africa, I am joined by Shando Theron, who's a senior partner at Theron Inc., and he's also a specialist divorce attorney as well. Shando, good to have you on the program this afternoon. Firstly, what do you think are the primary reasons behind the rising divorce rates in the country?
Yeah, I just want to echo your sentiment that it's with a sense of sadness that you hear this news. The rising divorce rate, I think the divorce rate's actually been quite steady for a while. I think divorces have just become less stigmatized, more public. Especially if you see high public figures like this getting divorced. It's happened more and more. I think we're just more aware of it. And unfortunately, they are right in line with statistics. Their marriage is 8 years, and about half of marriages falter within the first 8 years, 7 to 8 years. So what is the reason for all of this? I think social media has got a lot to do with it. There's a lot of attack on what we knew as a central family. And what that means, and of course, where people are much more mobile, traveling around a lot more pressure is on people from various sectors, and of course, it's much easier these days to stray from the bonds of marriage. It's a lot less work. I can lie in bed next to my spouse and be involved right there in 3 or 4 relationships, via the internet, which would be considered cheating.
Yeah, you mentioned social media and the internet as well. I want us to expand a bit more on other aspects. How does divorce culture in South Africa really differ from other countries? And what role does social media then play in shaping public perceptions of divorce?
Well, I think if we look at the Kolisis, they have been an absolute example in our country of everything that can go right. And social media has made people's lives very, very public. Even people with mundane lives can now put their lives, on the internet, and we can know about it. But it's with a sense of sadness that we see them falter. It's also, I think, such a nice way. They are continuing to be an example to us in the way that they're handling with this divorce. They, as you said earlier, they put out a joint statement on social media. They have said they're still putting the children first. They are still continuing to work together in the Kolisi Foundation, who does fantastic work for underprivileged children. And they are putting the children first. And they are showing us, and they continue to be an example. They are showing us that divorce doesn't have to be ugly, and that they are, I think, in a sense, destigmatizing the fact that it's okay to walk away from a relationship if it's not fit for purpose anymore, and if you stay in the relationship, that it will become toxic. And I think this is how it differs from other countries. I think, once again, they're a shining example of showing us that it doesn't have to be ugly, because what do we see in other countries or overseas, and I'm talking about America and Europe, where stars get involved in a divorce, it becomes super ugly, and it becomes super ugly on social media.
Divorce doesn't have to be ugly, to take from your words, but given the emotional ramifications of divorce, how can couples then navigate the process in a way that minimizes harm to themselves or even their children?
I think that's the most important question, and that if you now state that you're going to get divorced, the big question is what now? And it doesn't have to be ugly. So how do you navigate it in a way that minimizes the damage to the vulnerable parties? In this case, definitely the children, and of course them themselves. So firstly, you start off by getting competent specialist matrimonial lawyers. If you have competent attorneys, they will make sure that in a case like this, what is focused on is the settlement agreement and the parenting plan, and that when you go to court, that agreement has been finalized and signed, and it's in what they call a no contest divorce. You go to court, and it's about a 5-minute procedure, literally, where the parties don't even have to attend at court. And it's not a public mudslinging match. And that is how you do it. You do it properly by firstly employing competent specialist matrimonial attorneys, which I'm sure they have.
But what are some of the effective strategies for co-parenting, for example, post-divorce, particularly in high-profile cases where public scrutiny is high?
Yes, I think that's what makes it so much more difficult on them, isn't it? That everything they do is going to be judged, and you're going to have the tabloid media just waiting for them to make a mistake. And there's no such thing as a perfect parent, and there's no such thing as a perfect partner. And people are going to make mistakes, and people are going to argue and have disagreements, even in marriages where people live in some house and they stay together. There will be disagreements about parenting styles and disciplining style. So what do you do in a situation like this? Well, firstly, it is essential that through this high stress time that you seek psychological help yourself and you go for counseling. And if you don't have a psychologist or somebody that you can talk to, a third party, a neutral third party, definitely this is time to get one. And there's also if it starts becoming more high conflict and you guys are rubbing each other up the wrong way, you can appoint a parenting coordinator. This is somebody who's almost like a judge on call. It doesn't take away the role of the court, but it's somebody who's available to make a snap decision without you having to go to court. And if you have a parenting coordinator and that person right there, that person could make a snap decision, you don't have to run to court, because running to court and having the court decide on a matter and making somebody unhappy, that's very traumatic for all the parties.
So Shando, you also join us this afternoon as a specialist divorce attorney. Let's speak about the law now. How have recent amendments to divorce laws in the country impacted the divorce process overall? And what should couples be aware of?
Well, I think one of the great forward steps in our country, there's a number of that happened recently. And when I say recent, let's talk about it within the last decade, is we've moved into a no-fault divorce system. Previously, if you strayed from the bonds of marriage or you did something that you weren't supposed to do and you weren't as far as your morals, the statue of liberty without reproach, then you would get punished for it financially in the divorce process or lose access to your children. But our law has caught up with the times, and they've now come to realize that people are people. You are going to make mistakes. You are going to do things you shouldn't have done that you regret, because that is just the human process. You're human, you're fallible. You're not perfect. And in a no-fault divorce system, unless you have really, really, really gone out to hurt the other party, that does not come into play anymore in how the assets are distributed or how your access to your children. Of course, that's now if there's not been violence involved or not some form of addiction. Then, of course, different rules come into play, and then you need help, and your children should be protected from you. But if there hasn't been addiction of some sort and there hasn't been violence of some sort, you are treated as a human being, and you don't have to be perfect. So the no-fault divorce system has certainly helped to speed things up.
But what role do support systems play, especially friends, family, or even professional counselors? What role do they play in the divorce process? And how can individuals find the right kind of support?
Yeah, families are essential. Families can help a lot, or they can also harm a lot. A lot of divorces that I have, it's more of family versus family than the actual couple getting divorced. And I've had a number of matters where once you get the couple away from the family interference, they are actually not the problem and they want to continue with the marriage. But it's one family that has now picked up problems with the other family, and that it's them that is making the situation so toxic. And unfortunately, you can't escape that. Your family is well-meaning, but the family is generally going to take your side. Even sometimes when you've done something you shouldn't have done, the family is still going to back you up, and they are going to do that because they are well-meaning and they want to support you. But then they might say or do things in front of the children, and they might badmouth the other family or badmouth the other person, well-meaning because they want to back you up, but that does damage again, because it's very confusing for the children when they hear these things about the other parent. So there, a family can sometimes do more damage than good. But once again, as I say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. They do it while having good intentions. Professional counseling, there are some really, really good counseling institutions out there or that can help you. The Gauteng Family Law Forum is certainly one of the pertinent and prominent ones you can approach. They will help you find the necessary mediators. They will help you find the necessary parenting coordinators. They will help you. There's also FAMSA, which is also fantastic with the work that they do. So there's a lot of really good organizations out there, and there's an industry that's grown up around making divorce less traumatic.
Shando, what advice would you give, especially to couples, about maintaining open lines of communication during a divorce to ensure a respectful and amicable separation here?
It's difficult. It's difficult because generally when people get divorced, the one party feels phenomenally aggrieved, if not both. Someone has generally done something that's broken the trust. And relationships are built on trust. If you can't trust another party, it's very hard to be in a relationship with them. And if that person has done something and broken the trust, and you feel aggrieved, and they had, let's say, for instance, they had an affair with your best friend, and everybody knew about it for years, and you were the last to find out, you're going to feel like an absolute fool. And now that person that's hurt you, that's potentially, you have to, your whole life that you planned with them, the house where you lived, seeing your children, all that's been taken away from you, and now you have to sort of put that behind you and try and cooperate for the children's best interest. It's an almost impossible job. So that's why it's so important that you get counseling quickly to help you move past that, because that anger, that bitterness that you can have can ruin every other relationship in your life, including that with your children.
Shando, as we start winding down our conversation, how do you view the public's reaction, especially to celebrity divorces, and what implications does this have for the individuals who are involved?
I feel for them. I feel for them. Divorce is hard enough as it is. Of the 5 bad things that can happen to you in life, divorce is number 3. And the first is the death of a child, the second is bankruptcy, and the third is divorce. So it is traumatic, it's difficult, and now you're still being publicly scrutinized with people saying the most horrible things about you, not knowing anything about the divorce. I think if the public anything wants out there, please focus on the fact that how dignified they are behaving, how they put out a joint statement. No one is mudslinging anybody. No one is degrading anybody. So if you want to take anything out of this and see what example they've been to us in public life, look at the example they're continuing to be to us, how dignified they are doing this.
But in your experience, what proactive steps can couples take to indeed strengthen their marriage and potentially avoid a divorce?
You know what, in a marriage, and there's a number of really good books out about how you can do that. And there's an author called Brené Brown, which has written a book called Atlas of the Heart. That's very good. And there's also, it's all about communication, really, and about being vulnerable in front of the other party and managing their expectations and what you expect. A lot of times in divorces, there are spoken rules and unspoken rules. And the unspoken rules are actually much more important than the spoken rules. But people sometimes have different views of certain things and they don't know it. So there's a good book out there, and I don't have the author right now, which couples should do before they get married. It's called The 100 Hard Questions. Who has the final say on the finances? Who has the final say on where the children go to school? What if you don't like someone's friends? What if you don't like the relationship someone has with an ex-partner? It's all in there, and to get the stuff out in the wash rather before the marriage than after can really help a lot. But in the end of the day, it comes down to communication, and the other party must know what you expect, and you must have a clear indication, both of you, what are the rules of your marriage? What are you allowed to do, and what are you not allowed to do? And every now and then those rules should be reviewed, because as a couple you grow.
Yeah, but looking ahead, how do you see the landscape of marriage and also divorce evolving in South Africa over the next decade? We've spoken about the law. We've also spoken about getting help.
Yeah, in Europe, they're thinking of coming up now with a six-year marriage, because the divorces are clogging up the divorce courts, and it's the 6, 7, 8 years. And what they're thinking of doing in Europe, and there's been a white paper on it, that you can get married, and if there's no children after 6 years, if you don't renew your marriage, you're automatically divorced. And I think that is certainly a progressive step towards dealing with a high divorce rate and destigmatizing it. Of course, if there's not children involved. Another way, of course, is where our law is moving towards, but it's not quite there yet, is maybe giving recognition to, as they call, common law relationships, where parties live together for a number of years. For all practical purposes, they are married, there are children involved, but they never had their marriage formally solemnized. I think some of the benefits that accrue to married couples should accrue to them in certain instances. So the law is always evolving and moving forward, but the law should be the conservative bastion of society. It shouldn't be quick to change. It should be the last to change, because a lot of times there's a whim or a fad and it goes away as quickly as it comes. So the law can't change with that all the time. The law should be the conservative bastion of society, and the law should change slowly.
Shando Theron, thank you so much for your time, sharing his insights on the current state of divorce culture in South Africa. He is also joining us as a specialist divorce attorney as well.